Hi, this is Lauren here to talk about my peeps and my family tree. You can see that unfortunately I don't have too much information about most of my family history. There are a few reasons for that I'll get to in a moment. I do want to just point out right now, as my mother and father, of course, I have information on. This information about my grandparents on my mom's side are things I already knew. Their parents, I only had their names of. My dad's parents, I only had the names of. So any information outside of their names is purely from Ancestry.com, where I tried to do a lot of my research. So the reasons that I wasn't able to fill in this tree that much. First of all, I was adopted at birth, so I do feel like that gives kind of a difference a little bit in my situation. My parents were much older, so I didn't really have a lot of their family around when I was growing up. For example, I'm 20, I just turned 24. My dad is turning 72 this year, and my mom just turned 65 last month. So they're a lot older than typical parents of children my age. So unfortunately, most of their family was deceased already. Also, on my dad's side of the family, he is fairly estranged from them. He was close with his brother and, his brother's wife and their children. His brother unfortunately did pass away in 2010 of pancreatic cancer. They were, well, I'll get into their history a little bit more. My mom's father passed away in either 2000 or 2002, also from cancer. Her mother is still alive. She's 83 now, as it says on there, but she does have some pretty bad dementia. So unfortunately, I couldn't talk to anyone on my mom's side of the family. My aunts and uncles are all kind of all over the place and pretty busy with their own lives, so I didn't really have a chance to talk to them. On my dad's side of the family, I do have two siblings that are his kids in their mid 40s. But unfortunately, given they don't know that much about his history, there were some issues in his upbringing, and he doesn't really talk about them. Therefore, we don't really know anything about his family or his history. I do know that biologically, I am Native American, French, Irish, and German. I got that information from my biological sister. I started talking to her about 6 years ago. I could be a couple of other things. She has a different birth father than I do, so he might have a couple of other nationalities that she wasn't sure of, that I biologically have. Of course, I don't know how much my biology affects me without that being in my upbringing. Of course, the classic debate of nature versus nurture. Um, but let me, I guess, talk about the family that I do know a little bit. I'll go with my dad first since we have less on his side. He went into the Marines when he was 16 years old. He was born and raised in Vermont. His family really had no money. They had to hunt for their food, things like that. He started doing a lot of odd jobs when he was 8 or 10 years old, cutting ice from Lake Champlain, putting it in a storage house, just handiwork around their town, things like that. So he went into the Marines because he really saw no other future for himself other than the military. So he ended up being sent to Vietnam. His brother Jim was as well. They both got injured in Vietnam. And my dad was 19 or 20 when he was injured. It was the same day as the Tet Offensive. He actually got shot in his right femoral artery, and his recovery from that is just one of the many, many testaments to how strong he is as a person. He was awake through every single surgery, refused to have his leg amputated, even though doctors were convinced that he wouldn't be able to keep it. But it works fine now. It's just a couple inches shorter, and he has some pretty gnarly scars on it. but he's just an amazingly strong person. Due to him being in the military, he was then able to go on to college and get his master's in business. He has worked with many, many different companies. Started with consulting, ended up being the president of a couple different companies that did various things. He finally retired a couple years ago and now just plays golf as much as he can. He was one of 3 children. He also had a sister who died when I was fairly young. I don't really know anything about her. It appeared that his father was in the military and his mother was just a housewife. I'm not even sure of her last name. You can see on there I got 2 different spellings of it, one from Ancestry, one from my mother. I do know there's some Canadian heritage. They live very close to the Canadian border in Vermont. That's about all I know. My mother, also a very, very strong person. She went to Connecticut College, had a degree in French, also got certified to teach, but ended up going into the insurance world instead because of connections with her father. He was a Dartmouth graduate, originally in the Army, and then moved over to insurance. But she was getting into insurance at a time that women were still mostly only secretaries. So she had to battle a lot with that, but made her way in the insurance business. Born in May, I guess I forgot to put the year in there, but like I said, she just turned 65 this year, one of 4 children. Currently, she's the president of the 100 Club, who does a ton of fundraising for the Children's Hospital in Savannah. So just a very strong, dedicated woman. So I do feel blessed to have been raised by 2 such strong people. My mother's side, her father, Paul Liscord, as I said, went to Dartmouth, originally in the Army. I only knew that because of Ancestry. I'd never heard about it from my parents. His side of the family is very French-Canadian. The only information I have past him is from Ancestry.com. My grandmother's parents were direct immigrants from Scotland. She was actually on the first ship to get hit by a German U-boat in World War II because they were going to visit family back in Scotland. And she was I think 14 or 15 when that happened. So that's kind of our fun historical fact. My mom likes to say that my grandma started World War II. And that's unfortunately about all I know about that side of the family. As I said, I couldn't really talk to anyone about it, unfortunately, at this time. But I do know a little bit of information about them, and I hope you enjoyed this.